It's Tuesday, July 15th. I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Forecast, and it is a hell of a day to talk ball. And join me to do that is my good friend, literally my good friend, I guess so, is Josh Norris of Underdog Fantasy. Josh, what's going on, buddy?
You brought a negative Norris today. Can't wait. I don't get to make one of these appearances too often, Matt. I always love the conversations that we get to have together, and I'm glad other people get to tune into them.
Absolutely. I did a good spot on your show. At least I think it was halfway decent on the third-year wide receivers not too long ago. So a little bit of like a delayed home and home here. But yeah, Josh, you mentioned it. Negative Norris needs to come out today, buddy, because we are continuing our mini series here that we're doing on the show before training camp officially gets rolling. Although the Chargers are in training camp right now, which
crazy.
When I got that tweet, was that like over the weekend? I was like, whoa. I was not ready. I was not ready to read that an NFL team is in training camp, but that's because the damn Hall of Fame game is what, like July 31st?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
Life is over, but still all these teams are not in training camp yet. So we are continuing our little mini series here on the show, Contrarian Corner. Look, I'm way too optimistic. I know Josh and Hayden as well are pretty optimistic leaning on their show too, like positive when things call for it. We'd rather talk well and in a good light about these guys than not. However, not everything goes to plan. Frankly, we're wrong more often than not in the fantasy football space. So we're playing a little bit of devil's advocate here right before fantasy draft season gets rolling. And our topic today is, what if the second-year quarterbacks don't take the leap? Because, Josh, we have 6 quarterbacks that were drafted in the first round last year. They're all slated to start this year. They're all attached to varying degrees to players that we care about. And right now, I mean, everybody's doing their second-year quarterback review show, and it's all generally positive. Like, we're all feeling pretty good about where these guys are heading. But look no further than last year, Josh, to CJ Stroud, who at this point last year, we're all moonwalking, into our top 10 quarterbacks overall list, not fantasy wise, but even though he was drafted very high in fantasy, but certainly top 10 NFL quarterback. Did not go well in his second season for Stroud. Houston Texans offense was messy. Bobby Slowick was fired. This happens all the time. So I think it's important to look ahead on these guys and paint the picture of how it could go wrong, even if we don't think that it will.
100%. And as you said, people always believe progression is linear, that if you start off well as a rookie, then you're only going to get better in your second year, only get better in your third year. And that's just not the case. And I think the quarterback position, as much as we like to isolate it, Matt, is so dependent on a number of factors around them. It is on some level an environmental position. And especially when things go poorly, it can really tank plays, which then tank drives, which then tank halves, which then tank games, right? And I think CJ Stroud was the perfect example of this. Like, obviously, Bobby Slowick had some, not pitfalls, but some negative parts of his game as a first-year coach. I kind of push back on how everyone hated him after CJ Stroud's rookie year, because going back and watching Nico Collins and Tank Dell, he utilized those guys to the maximum in terms of condensed splits. We're going to, have everything so focused closer to the football and then attack outside the numbers and outside the hashes. And yet in year 2, when the offensive line really fell off a cliff, like you watch, I think it was that New York Jets game, a couple of others, they couldn't pick up a twist or a stunt to save their life. There was no communication. If you can't fix that as a play caller and get people back on track, then it probably is time to go. So again, I think CJ Stroud is very much the same player that he was during his first year as he was in his second year. The environment just tanked what his EPA and success rate and everything else happened in year 2.
Yeah, a lot of really good points there and things that are going to be instructive throughout the course of our conversation here today. Most importantly, that, and you say this all the time, progression is not linear for quarterbacks, certainly for any position in the NFL. And that's the thing, is like, I don't think CJ Stroud is suddenly, he's on bust watch or he's not going to be good, because his third season might be the time where he makes the leap. And even for any of these guys that we say, maybe they don't make the leap in their second season, that doesn't mean that it's over or whatever. That leap could come in the third season. And secondly there, like, some of this is not going to be on, if it goes wrong for any of these quarterbacks that we're about to talk through today, it doesn't have to be on them, because even the good stats, this is certainly true, I talk about it wide receiver all the time, but even the good stats for quarterbacks, it's not player isolating, right? EPA, success rate, these things are more like the health of the environment than they are actually on the quarterback. And so again, perhaps it does go wrong for, a Drake Maye in his second season or something like that. That doesn't mean that it's over or that he will never get better, because same with Stroud. I do think that it was probably 90% on the environment last year, whether it was wide receiver injuries, the construction of the offense, certainly the pass protection plan and the overall play up front. But I'd also say that the longer that the environment stays poor, the more bad habits a quarterback can develop. So really, I guess that's what we're looking for, Josh. Like, will these guys fail, but can they be failed in their second season?
Totally. And so many situations of the players we're about to talk about here have changed or have improved, at least on paper. Again, you would like to think that equals improvement and a level up, or just getting back on track. And maybe we can consider someone like Caleb Williams. This is rookie season after everything that he dealt with during his first year in the league. So I just want to say, for all the fan bases that is watching this episode, I am optimistic about every single one of these quarterbacks. I want that on the record, so I don't have to say it before every single one of these names. Matt, if I get hate for stuff that I'm saying, it's on you. It's not on me.
Okay. Yeah, whatever. I'm totally fine with that. I can live with that. All right. You mentioned Caleb Williams. We're not actually going to go in order of how these guys were drafted in the NFL draft a couple of years ago. It's actually going to go just in terms of ADP order for fantasy football this year, which starts with Jayden Daniels, 36th overall ADP, quarterback 3 according to Fantasy Points consensus ADP. First of all, and this should be a pretty simple question, Josh, what do we think of his rookie season last year?
It was excellent. And I was even nervous. I guess nervous is the right word, entering after preseason games into the regular season, because the preseason was so simple. It was so bland. He had wonderful stats, but everything, as you know, was like close to line of scrimmage and nothing really over the middle or working down the field. It was like that for about a game and a half once the regular season hit. And then it really expanded and exploded from there. And it was just as much of a Jayden Daniels conversation for me as what could we expect from the play caller that he's tied to in Cliff Kingsbury, because the most recent stuff that we had from Cliff was this horizontal raid at Arizona. And now we can look back on that, Matt, and say that was a Kyler Murray problem and not necessarily a Cliff Kingsbury problem. And so Jayden doing all of this and just translating exactly how he wanted the college level into the NFL level immediately with, let's say, throwing to, and no offense, Olamide Zaccheaus, Noah Brown, Zach Ertz, and those are areas that they continue to build up year over year over year. Certainly, at the very least, gives you a lot of optimism moving forward.
I completely agree with everything you just said there. That my biggest concern with Jayden was not so much like, oh, how is he going to play or anything based on his college tape. It was, what is the offense going to look like? What is Cliff Kingsbury at this point as a play caller? Worth noting that we had never actually seen Cliff Kingsbury as just an offensive coordinator in the NFL. We'd seen him as a play calling head coach. So that's a lesson that I'm taking away from this, is that, hey, I think we too focus on like these guys' names or whatever, and we don't focus enough on the actual job. I think this is actually true, by the way, with the guy that we're going to talk about with the Bears, and like Shane Waldron's become this like big boogeyman, and even to the point that I've gotten some questions with him like, hey, he's the pass game coordinator in Jacksonville. Like, does that make you nervous? I'm like, well, I wasn't nervous when he was the pass game coordinator for a really good Rams offense several years ago. Right. So I'm not all that concerned about him being the pass game coordinator here. It's just certain guys are good in one job, and then when they get promoted, they're maybe not so good at that anymore, and vice versa. So anyways, getting back to this Washington team, obviously, Cliff Kingsbury's back for a second season. They've added a guy like Deebo Samuel. They've made a few offensive line upgrades, Laramie Tunsil in the trade from the Houston Texans. The highest drafted players in terms of Washington right now, they only have 3 picks other than Jayden Daniels himself in the top 110 selections right now. Terry McLaurin, 36th overall, Deebo Samuel, 77th overall, and Brian Robinson, 88th overall. Everybody else is kind of like a late round sleeper, if that. How can it go wrong for Washington this year, though?
So the other part of the Daniels / Cliff conversation entering his rookie season was also about the offensive line. And I would say this offensive line overperformed any other versus expectation. Now, they didn't just sit in their laurels, if I'm using that phrase correctly. They tried to actually improve it. You know, they made the move for Laramie Tunsil. They drafted Josh Connerly in the first round, who might flip on over to right tackle, and then they'll move, Brandon Coleman around too. My issue with that is, we just talked about CJ Stroud to open this. I thought Laramie Tunsil was average at best last year. There was a reason why that team in Houston struggled so much along the offensive line and then traded away their top paid left tackle because they thought that they could be improved without him on the field. And I'm sure there were some things behind the scenes, but let's just leave it as simple as that. So there is a chance when you move these pieces around and Sam Cosmi's coming off an injury that this offensive line somehow takes a step back, even if they added and invested more into it. And that stands out to me, Matt, because he did go from completing around 76% of his passes, which is the 5th best when kept clean in the NFL last year, down to about 46% of his passes, which is still 21st in the league.
Yeah.
But, there is a big difference, from 21st to drafted as top 3, playing like a top 6 quarterback in the league as a rookie. And it's still one of those things where, we nitpick these prospects heading into the league. And Jayden Daniels, his stats were almost outlier in a whole bunch of metrics coming out of LSU. And one of the big ones was like his pressure to sack rate, that when he is pressured, he doesn't throw the football, he just scrambles away. We also learned that he can still do that at the NFL level, despite these guys being bigger and faster and older and better than the ones that he faced in the SEC. So I'm not saying that his scrambling is just going to go away. He still has this unreal spatial awareness to keep an arm's distance away, and he shocks defenses when you're watching him on a weekly basis and going back and reviewing his tape. But I do wonder that if he is just kind of forced into this pocket a little bit more often, and it kind of constricts a little bit more versus giving him this space and this freedom and actually forcing him to throw the ball in those instances, if that is one area that he could be less efficient than he was last year.
The interesting word that you threw out there was shocked, right? Because I think that he did I've heard interviews of NFL defenders being it was literally shocking, how fast he was.
And you can tell that by the angles that these defenders take, right? Yes. Not the linebackers going to the sideline, or even the safeties trying to fill alleys and stuff. How he would just be at the same speed and running right around him, and they would, they're just not used to it. They weren't expecting it. And so, yeah, shock to me is the true word when watching Jayden Daniels, because it looks like he's not moving that fast, but then he's just running around people without actually having to break tackles.
So on that note, do you think there's any credence to the idea, the typical pushback that you get to, the sophomore slump? Well, they're going to have a year's worth of tape on him, this, that, and the other. Do you think there's any credence? All right, well, once these guys study him for a year, they've figured this offense out maybe a little bit more. Because I think Cliff did a lot of really good things from a design perspective, but it wasn't necessarily oh my God, this is like Sean McVay or anything like that. Maybe again, just a year's worth of tape on the offense, on Jayden Daniels himself. Is there anything that unless he takes a step forward, maybe they can kind of hone in on in terms of defending him?
Well, I mentioned that this team, despite being really good offensively, did continue to invest in offense. And I like that. You try to make a strength stronger versus trying to make everyone on your team just really quality starters. That's just not how an NFL, team operates when they're trying to go from basically worst to first, like the Washington Commanders have done. Their big investment, other than the offensive line, was Deebo Samuel. And I think, how people viewed Deebo last year is fair in that he hit a wall with the 49ers. Now, he had pneumonia, ended up in a hospital, and we know the wear and tear of his body, especially for him among the wide receiver position, is impacting him more so than others. But I guess, Matt, my concern is if Deebo doesn't hit, what happens? Because he was brought in to this offense to create after the catch. They don't really have anyone else on that offense that you can get the football in their hands and, break a tackle or two and turn a 7-yard gain into a 27-yard gain. I'm actually in on Deebo Samuel at cost. I'm actually in on Deebo Samuel as an impact on this team because I think he still can affect a game and win in ways that he, still brings to an NFL team. And Cliff is going to isolate him in those scenarios, screens, short passes, zone beaters, all that type of stuff. but we've also seen him miss time. If that doesn't work now, and I know you're going to laugh, like they don't have Olamide Zaccheaus on this team. Olamide Zaccheaus still had weeks that were like outrageous last year in terms of wide receiver 6 and wide receivers 14 points in any given week. And, you know, he's a really fun role player. So they've lost that in order to upgrade. And if the one upgrade isn't actually an upgrade, then I think there's also cause for concern there.
Right. And I think even if he does hit as an impact player, and this is maybe where you and I kind of part ways in terms of the Deebo Samuel thing, I think even if he hits as an impact player, I still feel like this offense will feel like it's missing something, because I think they probably could have used, unless like Luke McCaffrey really takes a big jump in his second season. And I don't know if you've gone back and watched McCaffrey at all, but I thought there were times where I was like, all right, he's showing a little something, but then it kind of felt like maybe this team just like gave up. And I don't want to say gave up on him, but we're like, all right, we're actually really good. Like, we're not trying to develop Luke McCaffrey, who is like a pure developmental player. We're trying to go win games. So like, let's get De'Ami Brown more snaps. Let's get Zaccheaus more snaps. So, and I even think if McCaffrey hits, he's maybe not necessarily like the second outside receiver that they kind of need. Totally. So I do feel like Deebo Samuel is, 77th overall, whatever. But I think that even if he hits as an NFL player, which I'm skeptical about, he had the 4th worst success rate versus man coverage I've ever charted. Not like worst last year, just like ever in the history of reception perception. And I know he's never been like a great man beater, but we're going from like below average to really poor. And that was the case even before the pneumonia thing. Like, I think he really just hit a physical wall last year, as you mentioned. So I think he can still be useful for this team, but I think if things go wrong for Jayden Daniels, it's because that acquisition didn't work out. And, maybe Laramie Tunsil, like that was the beginning of a decline, not just, hey, he kind of had like a weird year.
Zach Ertz is a year older.
Zach Ertz is another year older. Austin Eckler is another year older. Brian Robinson doesn't like play how he kind of played at the beginning of the last year, because I thought, man, this is a team that really could use some more juice at running back, and I really think the only guy that's secure here in this offense is Terry McLaurin. But how secure do we feel about McLaurin as a fantasy player at 36th overall if this environment, again, if I understand where we're working in the if here, if this environment takes a step back?
Yeah, and McLaurin totally kind of reshaped his game where, I wish I had the stat pulled up, but had some absurd low number of red zone touchdowns in his career leading up to this past season, and then scores like 6 or 7 of them and one more than he had prior to, every single game he had played. And as we can point out, that's just a quarterback upgrade. Like, that actually turned out to be a quarterback stat versus a Terry McLaurin stat. Yeah, again, more investment in the offensive line than the skill players. I'm not saying, Matt, that I think Deebo Samuel is going to take this offense to the next level. I just think that how Cliff calls this offense, again, where it gave Olamide Zaccheaus a platform to be wide receiver 6 and wide receiver 14 weeks. It gave a platform for Noah Brown and De'Ami Brown to have top 25 wide receiver weeks. That I still think he has enough in the tank on manufactured touches, on underneath stuff versus zone coverage to have weeks that are like that, and maybe even a little bit more. But yeah, if the Tunsil and Samuel signings / trades do not work, then what was the real upgrade here? What was to get to the next level? Because if you just continue to ask your quarterback to win on those downfield reps, which we know can be high variance at times, and then also if he's contained a bit more because defenses understand how dangerous, and actually seen it with their eyes, how dangerous of a scrambler he is, then I think the offense constricts more than it should, and it did last year.
So any actual real concern? Like, how concerned are you really?
Dude.
Now, yeah, you're not actually concerned at all. Like, this is all, again, hypothetical stuff. You feel pretty good.
Jayden Daniels literally might be my highest drafted player this summer. He is going in round 4 on Underdog right now, and I think he is the quarterback 3 easily. I think he should be much closer to where Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen are being drafted over and over again. I have real hesitations about a lot of the wide receivers being drafted in his range. and especially at like the end of round 3 after like the Chase Brown cliff, let's say at the running back position, I'm simply going to draft an elite quarterback over someone like Kyren Williams at this point. And look, I wasn't sky is falling with Kyren Williams heading into the 2024 year. I'm more so doing that in 2025. And I just want one of these bankable elite quarterbacks and figuring out my build from there.
Yeah, I actually think the funny thing about Jayden Daniels is that he's so good and he's such an impactful rusher that he can be a great fantasy pick, and like Terry McLaurin can take a small step back in the touchdown column, and like Deebo Samuel might not really work out. I just think, again, the type of quarterback he is, like there's such a great margin for error. So I'm certainly not concerned about Jayden Daniels, the individual. There's like part of me that might be a little concerned about the environment overall, but I'm still with you that I think he can be a great pick where he's going.
My final point is, if Cliff left to get a head coaching job somewhere, I wouldn't have said this a year ago. I would have had more hesitation heading into this year because I really think Cliff did like a masterful job of getting a young quarterback who, had a ton of experience in college, but prepared just on a weekly basis and ready for the season, where he didn't feed him the entire playbook in the preseason or week 1. He started adding more and more and more. And Jayden is so calm throughout the game. Like there is no roller coaster with him. It just seems like he is even keeled no matter the highs or the lows on top of it. And I think, again, Cliff just adding, like, it felt like page by page on a weekly basis until he had the full thing at the end of the season. I just don't think another play caller could have come in and done as good of a job as Cliff did last year.
Speaking of a lot of experience in college, the next guy that we're going to talk about here was actually the last quarterback drafted in the first round last year, Bo Nix. But he is the second quarterback being drafted in fantasy right now, 82nd overall, QB8. Josh, what did you think of Bo Nix's rookie season?
It started off rough. The first 3 to 4 games, there was a lot of concern. It felt like he was trying to find the Goldilocks zone of how much to move or how little to move. Like, we know he's a great scrambler. And then there were some games where he would, after that was successful, move way too much in the pocket versus just sitting back there and going through his reads. And that would end in, extended plays or missed timing. And then he'd like throw on the move. And that was when he was the most scattershot for me as well. But this goes back to coaching and finding a great situation for a young passer, because as the rocky start happened, you just saw Sean Payton really diagram an offense that gave him layups, whether it be screens, swings, manufactured stuff that would kind of suck in the defenses as it went along. And then they would take these massive shot plays down the field, single reads to Marvin Mims or Cortland Sutton or whoever else. And they would just connect, so often they would hit. And that can change, right? Again, we talk about the high variance nature of this. And so I thought it was a Sean Payton masterclass. I don't want to take that away from Bo Nix at all. And at the same time, now Bo Nix gets hopefully even more talents on top of this that can help elevate his game to the next level too.
Yeah, I think that's when we get to sort of the how can it go wrong phase of this year. I actually think it's instructive to look back at last year, where I've said this a lot, that it was basically Cortland Sutton and then a bunch of kind of dudes orbiting around Cortland Sutton. Nobody else ran a route on more than 50% of the dropbacks overall for Denver last year, but Sutton was up there at like 90%. So I do think, obviously, when we're talking about Cortland Sutton, he's the highest drafted player. He's the highest drafted Denver Bronco this year at 50th overall. So, I in some way, actually, it's like, if Bo Nix and this doesn't go right this year, we actually he might be like the one that matters the least here, because it's like, he's not going to cause one of these highly drafted players to fail or anything, because people aren't drafting Cortland Sutton that aggressively. But I do think for it to go right again this year, I think the Sutton-Bo Nix connection has to remain really strong in terms of those deeper over the middle targets, like deeper dig routes that Cortland Sutton was crushing on, which are just like Sean Payton staples. Sutton has to have another good year. And I think some of these role players that were existing last year and the guys that they added this year have to just be better this year too. I don't know I know you and I are actually skeptical about Marvin Mims like doing anything other than what he did last year, which was sick, by the way. I really like what he did last year.
He's an awesome role player. I just don't know if we or even Sean Payton believes he can be more, but we'll find out soon.
We will find out soon. And then we'll also find out if guys like RJ Harvey, who's the 69th overall pick right now in fantasy, if he can hit immediately. Evan Ingram is the 107th overall drafted player. He's in this cohort of like top 110 picks. Can he really be that? I don't even want to say joker, but can he be like that sort of player for Sean Payton? And they drafted Pat Bryant in the 3rd round. Can Devon Vele and him kind of coexist? So I think in terms of how we can avoid a sophomore slump for Knicks, the offensive line is great. I'm more like kind of concerned about the playmakers stepping up in another year here.
I hear you. And let's just go through each of those names real quick. What Evan Ingram kind of turned into with the Jacksonville Jaguars was a whole bunch of like split flow action where they get the play running in this direction. They would play action off of it and he'd be working the opposite. He'd catch the ball near the line of scrimmage and then rumble for 7 to 17 yards after the catch. He's still highly athletic, and I think he's in his 30s now. But that's how he racked up like the quietest 100 reception season that we've seen in a very, very long time, right? RJ Harvey, I am in love with. I loved his profile at UCF, how he was able to break tackles, create huge gains. There was no way I thought he's going to go in the 2nd round, and I'm thrilled that he did. He, again, is someone that works against the grain, creates these explosives, wins with the ball in his hands. Not a great pass protector, but you bring in J.K. Dobbins as, again, someone who had some explosive plays last year, was one of the best stories in the league coming off that injury, coming back from it. And now that's your 1-2 punch. That 1-2 punch is a lot better than Javonte Williams, Jaleel McLaughlin, and Audric Estime, right? So hopefully the talent increase also gives a rushing aspect to this game and this team, and which, Matt, that could naturally lower some of Bo Nix's production as well and his stats as well. Like if the possibly running game does better, then some of the passing stuff just isn't going to need to be as successful. And then truly, Pat Bryant was one of my favorite prospects in the class. I don't know if many people heard about him until draft weekend, but I thought he had some of the best hands in this class. I'm not going to say he's a great athlete or a separator, but just if it was around his frame, he was going to catch it. And we have seen wide receivers from Marcus Colson to Michael Thomas. I understand Pat Bryant was mostly like an outside wide receiver, and who knows if he wants to take, Devon Vele's spot away, or Sean Payton does. But I could see Pat Bryant kind of thriving in that middle of the field aspect too, because we know Sean Payton is kind of a size king when it comes to the wide receiver spots.
In my pre-draft write-up on Pat Bryant, I actually, on reception perception, I compared him to, ironically, former Broncos wide receiver Tim Patrick, current Detroit Lions wide receiver Tim Patrick. And, Patrick was never like a pure slot player. From 2019 to 2021. He was like 26%, 17.8%, 22.8% snaps in the slot. But, he was used on sort of those bigger intermediate routes that we're talking about here. He probably would profile as a guy who could be a nice big slot player. Actually, when Nathaniel Hackett took over, he was apparently going to be like a power slot player for the Denver Broncos. Probably wouldn't have worked out because nothing really worked out under Nathaniel Hackett. But nevertheless, I do think that he was a really, really nice role player for that Broncos team. And and he was a bit of a first down machine at times for that era of the Broncos offense. Not that there were a lot of first downs to come by for that era of Denver Broncos football, but I do think Pat Bryant could be that type of player for the Broncos. And again, like somebody like him stepping up, somebody like Evan Ingram adding another dimension when there wasn't really a tight end present last year. I think that the Broncos have done enough to insulate themselves from any sort of step back out of Bo Nix in his 2nd season. But your point about the run game is actually really well taken. Like, this team is so primed to run the ball with volume, with efficiency. And like, look, I was kind of stunned that people were surprised that they added another back on top of RJ Harvey, because like Harvey's a good prospect, but he's not necessarily doesn't profile like a feature back. And frankly, like, I feel like I say this every fantasy season. If you are not equipped to handle like another running back alongside the running back that you like, you've got to find a different hobby. Like, it just is what it is. Like, there's going to be a second back involved here. Yeah, there is going to be a second back involved here. And Harvey can still be good, and J.K. Dobbins can bring something to this team. They don't want like the guy that we were comparing on this show last year to Golem, the Pokemon, Audric Estime, like just a rolling bowling ball. They don't want that to be the second running back. They want like a real professional like J.K. Dobbins in there.
Yeah. I mean, last year, the Broncos were actually 10th in points scored across the league. And Hayden and I are actually recording a show today on, because I often say it with fantasy football, just take like good players on good teams. It's really not that simple, but sometimes it feels that simple, Matt.
Close.
Yeah. More so, it's basically avoiding the bottom line of 5 to 7 worst offenses in the league. And if one does hit from those teams, it's only one player. It's rarely 2 players doing it. Anyways, I guess my point is, of the top 20 scoring offenses last year, only 5 of those did not support a top 20 scoring running back in fantasy football. And the Broncos were certainly one. Now, can we get to the negatives here? I mean, I've been waiting this entire time, Matt. Like, for me, Bo Nix, one area that he has to improve, well, 2, he has to improve versus the blitz. But, you know, it can be tough to blitz him when Sean Payton was in his freaking bag last year with all of these manufactured diagram plays and, again, screens and swings and getting wide open receivers. And the other part is on extended plays over 2.5 seconds. I mean, according to Rich Rebar, when Bo Nix got rid of the football within 2.5 seconds of the snap, he was 10th in passer rating, throwing 15 touchdowns to 1 interception. 15 to 1, okay? Now, when he held the ball for over 2.5 seconds, which is just, you know, an extended play, first read isn't there, that dipped to 21st in passer rating and 14 touchdowns and 11 interceptions. So, you know, that's 29 combined passing touchdowns. That's still pretty freaking good. But the 11 interceptions certainly pop up. 11 to 1 is a pretty drastic thing. So when he was asked to either force throws into tighter windows or work off the script, more negative things happen. And if that isn't changed, I think that could maybe be where we see Bo Nix take a step back.
So really, it sounds more so that you're not too concerned about the environment here. You're maybe, I wouldn't say you're concerned about Bo Nix, but just like there are some areas in his game that do need to develop here.
Yeah, I mean, even dating back to his Oregon days, you could look at the raw stats and they were tantalizing. Now, it was easy to say that that was a lot of screens and, again, manufactured stuff. But then you could also eliminate all of those. And he was still one of, if not the top quarterback, you know, down the field, 10 plus yards throwing. So I'm actually not one of these people that is skeptical of Bo Nix as like an actual quarterback. I'm actually surprised that people are. I just think that he was set up to succeed. And when you see this offense and how it kind of ran on all cylinders with Sean Payton dialing it up, and when he dialed it up, it worked almost at a ridiculous rate. I just don't know if that can be as sticky year over year when these defenses are going to get, you know, more and more and more tape and figure out and see what, you know, worked and what didn't. I mean, that Bills game in the playoffs was not good, you know? So what if teams start from week 1 this season and attack them in a similar way, in a similar fashion? What is Bo Nix's curveball or counterpunch with Sean Payton?
And I think if that does happen, like at worst, I think this offense will kind of be mid or average. I do think because they have a good offensive line, because they have a good play caller, the floor is very high. And because I think Bo Nix showed himself to be at worst a starting caliber NFL quarterback last year. Like he's not somebody that's, oh, he's actually a secret bust and you know, whatever, like anything like that. I think the floor is rather high. It's just really what is the ceiling? And then how does that impact guys like RJ Harvey and Cortland Sutton, really the 2 players that people are drafting very highly. But it sounds like generally, Josh, we're not too concerned about this situation either. Let's move to the third guy here who, Caleb Williams, 92nd overall. He's the QB 11 in fantasy right now. I don't even really think we need to spend time on what do we think of his rookie season, Josh, because we've told that story over and over again. Here's what we thought. Gross. Okay. Like across the board, it was gross. We've talked, I feel, I'm sure you have on your show, on this show, we've talked ad nauseum about that Bears offense last year. I actually just got done charting DJ Moore last season because I hate myself, I guess. And this is like, I'm revisiting the Bears offense again. The 24 Bears offense again.
How was his route towards the bench in mid play, Matt? Was that all green?
Very successful getting to the bench. Not good product from our pal DJ Moore last year. Yeah, right. That was great stuff. Just lighten it up here, Josh. Electric stuff. But again, we know the product was bad last year for the Bears offense, so I don't really want to spend too much time on that. how optimistic are you that Ben Johnson comes in here, they get Keenan Allen out, and like everything is cleaned up here in this Bears offense?
Well, your conversation with Rome, I thought, was a great one. He talked about how detail oriented Ben Johnson is, how he's, making them work hard, which I think is notable here. They weren't
a lot
very
of like little subtle things from.
Yeah, I hear you. It showed up on the tape last year. It showed up on the field. I'm not saying it was all bad for every single one of these players on the team last year, but to me, it was very similar to what like Bryce Young went through during his rookie season, where, okay, the center blew his block on first down on a run. So it's actually going to be 2nd and 11. Then we get a, false start or an illegal formation that turns into 2nd and 16. Then there's some late pressure because they miss a twist or a stunt up front. And so now we're at 3rd and 12 after a dump off for a gain of 4. And now go and carry us, Caleb Williams, in this 3rd and 12 scenario. To me, Matt, it was very much a cyclical thing. One thing went wrong after another, and that just happened constantly. Now, Caleb Williams was also quite bad in a lot of areas. He was arguably like one of, if not the worst downfield passer in the NFL last season. He completed 27.5% of his passes on throws 20 plus yards down the field. That was 31st in the league. 36% of his passes 10 or more yards down the field. That was 34th in the league. It wasn't just that. When you went back and watched him, it was like he turned so stiff, like robotic. It was such a fluid player who played with like elegance and grace and fun and fluidity at USC. And then he gets to this offense and it looks like Shane Waldron said, okay, we need to practice you going here to here to here. And he also turned down throws over the middle field. Overarching point here, Matt, is a lot of the negative, reactions that you have when things are crumbling around you, coaching staff's getting fired, you're getting multiple voices in your ear week to week. We need those to finish in 2024 and not be brought over in 2025. But if some of those same dilemmas, pauses, concerns, and downright bad decisions and bad throws continue here and they actually become a part of his game, that is like a legitimate concern for me.
Couldn't agree more. There a lot of turn downs, a lot of just like, man, that wasn't even close from Caleb Williams at times, which, was definitely pretty shocking. I think that you can write off a lot of that to, hey, he wasn't really taught what to do. Like things were not synced up in terms of the drops to the route depths and, the miscues and zone coverage, I think was, you can lay a lot of blame at the feet of the environment. Like your point about how this is similar to what Bryce Young suffered through in his rookie season. Crazy because, man, the players, like we were in Bryce Young's rookie season, be like, man, he could really use a wide receiver like DJ Moore if only the Panthers had a wide receiver like DJ Moore. And DJ Moore was a huge part of why this offense was so bad last year. And you mentioned like you just want to avoid the bottom barrel offenses. This team was 29th in success rate last year and 29th in points per game. Like this was one of the offense that if you just drafted around Bears last year, you might have had a pretty nice fantasy season. But these guys were going pretty aggressively last year. And this year, I think that you can buy into Bears without buying in complete hopium for this whole Bears situation. Like DJ Moore, 41st overall is the highest drafted player. That is a little bit aggressive, but like Odunze 70th overall, DeAndre Swift 72nd overall. The two rookies that people are excited about, Luther Burden and Colson Loveland, they got to get on the practice field, but they're like deep 100th overall players, maybe not in the sicko best ball streets, but like redraft, those guys are going to be pretty close to free unless the hype gets really building here in August. So I think we're right to frame this as it's not just hey, Ben Johnson's going to come in here and spray the magic pixie dust. I think DJ's got to play better. I think Rome Odunze played pretty well in isolation last year, but he also has to take a step forward. And Caleb Williams just like straight up has to be better. So Josh, and also the offensive line additions that they made, those have to hit. Like those can't just be, hey, we made it look pretty good on paper. They got to actually play well on the football field. So that is kind of a lot to come together here, Josh. No,
it is. I mean, Joe Thuney, as we know, filled in at left tackle last year, is a bit older. They did give him an extension and is a really good player. But again, you never know when an age cliff hits. Drew Dahlman was the best center on the market, but that doesn't mean he's like a great center across the league. He's going to be a lot better than what they had last year, because arguably the worst center in the league played for the Chicago Bears. And then Jonah Jackson, he obviously has a history with Ben Johnson, but his year with the LA Rams, who had some offensive line issues of their own, he certainly didn't play great there. If we can get like really micro here for a moment, just his connection with Rome Odunze was so fun at times and so bad other times. Like in zone coverage, you brought this up. It felt like their timing, the landmarks that they were hitting was just totally off. I'm not in that room, so I can't tell you who was at fault, but it felt like at times Rome was taking a step or two too much, and then Caleb was throwing to a different place. And like they just left so many, yards and opportunities on the field. Rome's father also probably shouldn't be posting on Instagram whenever Caleb turned down a throw for him down the field.
Come on.
Like it just bad habits for everyone, including family members, probably need to be left in 2024. I'm with you though. Just quickly optimism. Like we talk about post-buy rookie bumps. Ben Johnson just investing in a top 10 tight end in Colson Loveland, who I think can change like the fabric of a passing game. After we just saw Ben Johnson have the #1 overall scoring tight end a couple years ago in Sam Laporta. Yeah, I want that as late as I can get him and buy the dip. And then even Luther Burden, like to me, Matt, a lot of people are going to typecast him or wish cast a Amon-Ra St. Brown-esque player here. I'm more on like the Jameson Williams train of how Ben Johnson just utilized Jameson Williams on those drag routes, on those vertical routes, get him working against the grain, get the ball in his hands with like freaking 15 yards of space and just let him run with the football and create massive explosives. That's to me the vision here with Luther Burden in this Bears offense.
Yeah, I really think that the vision for Luther Burden hitting is like he turns into what DJ Moore should be, which I think is why that was a pretty... That's a message sending pick. It's a notable selection there. So I do think that but by the way, to your point on Rome Odunze and the zone coverage, this is why I say like sometimes 3 receivers is too much. Sometimes 3 receivers is too much, especially for a young quarterback. Like, of course, your connection and your chemistry with the rookie is not that great when you're also trying to satisfy a disgruntled veteran. You're also trying to satisfy a guy in Keenan Allen who kind of like was the primary was like the primary read, because his receiver coach is the guy there. It was a lot of politic issues in that wide receiver room last year. And I do think trimming out some of the stuff here and just getting guys into like playing just one role that maybe suits their skill set a little bit better, that will do a lot for these playmakers. So I think I'm generally optimistic about this Bears offense, but I think it's worth noting that there are a lot of ifs that we're talking about here. And if 2 or maybe 3 of the 5 ifs go wrong, we could be looking at like, hey, this Bears offense isn't 29th this year, but maybe they're like 18th or something. And not everybody's going to hit from a fantasy standpoint.
Well, you and I always bring this up. Going from awful to average is such a massive win in the NFL. And like this offensive line going from awful to average is just going to give a platform for them to succeed on a series basis. The other point in this, and I know Ben Johnson, during his time calling plays with the Lions, started off with DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams, and then upgraded in one offseason to Jahmyr Gibbs and Dave Montgomery, which we have seen over the last few years. But they are #1 and have been in running back usage over these last few seasons. We know that Lions team was built on, hey, offensive line running and then play action off of that, just real shots off of that. What if this Bears rushing attack just isn't even close to as good as what Ben Johnson saw with the Detroit Lions, with no, Penix Sewell at right tackle, or these maulers in the middle, Frank Ragnow, who is now retired, So I think that could impact how just successful his play sequencing is and the success rate of everything else, and also how successful they can be inside the red zone on top of it.
That's a great point. Just how many touchdowns is this team going to score? Like, I think Swift is he's a pretty big pivot point player here, and I don't really have a strong take on him from a fantasy standpoint. I think that like Roschon Johnson's interesting as a late round flyer, but I mean, he might also be a stone cold zero. Like maybe Kyle Monangai is like the guy. I have no idea. I don't really. It's funny. I've spent so much time thinking about this Bears passing game, and then when you bring up the running backs, I'm kind of just like, shoot, I don't know. We'll see what happens.
I just want to know, if I had one question to ask Ben Johnson, it would be, do you like DeAndre Swift? Yes or no? Do you like him? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Because I mean,
how much of it was you versus Deuce Staley, in terms of like the beef back in the Detroit days?
For sure. And, I'm not going to pile on DeAndre Swift here, but we have seen two teams send him off into the distance, and they upgraded to Jahmyr Gibbs and Saquon Barkley, and that worked out pretty well for those offenses. So if he's the only guy left, the last man on earth, DeAndre Swift can have fantasy production here, or is he like a floor play and not a ceiling versus people thinking this is a ceiling play because DeAndre Swift is only good at certain aspects of the game, which he can be quite good at in terms of breaking tackles as a receiver, not good between the tackles as a runner. I have no idea how to handle this Bears running back room. I hope August and early September gives us more answers.
All right, so that was kind of a complex. Before we throw to break here, Josh, complex discussion there with the Bears. I'm going to put you on the scale here. 1, no optimism, or I guess 0, no optimism. 10, like full on, you're inhaling the hopium here. Once again, for the Chicago Bears, where do you fall on the scale?
I think I'm at an 8.1. Like I haven't forgotten what I felt of. What I thought of Caleb Williams as a prospect. I mean, dating back to as soon as he took over as a play caller, again, loved how Ben Johnson would set up these plays early in the game versus later on. How, we always talk about Shanahan trees and investing in just those offenses for fantasy football has worked out for us. To me, it's just so cool that Ben Johnson was kind of able to pick pieces from all these other coaches that he never worked with and make his own thing out of it. And I can't wait for him to weaponize Caleb Williams' mobility. Like this is something that Jared Goff really hasn't had, and Goff has been great under Ben Johnson. But what Caleb does and how he just torques his body on these throws when working to either sideline is unreal stuff. So I can't wait to see how he forces Caleb to not be robotic like we got from last year. And again, we get back to that fluid playmaker.
All right, we are going to take our first break. When we come back, we will talk through 3 more quarterbacks that are heading into their second season right after this. All right, we are back. We're continuing to go through the second-year quarterbacks in ADP order and, maybe painting how things can go wrong for them. Next quarterback up here, Drake Maye, 112th overall selection, QB 16. Josh, what did you think of Drake Maye's rookie season, and how are we feeling heading into this year?
I love him. He can do no wrong. He's perfect. Next. No, I mean, okay, we'll really talk about it.
Okay, you can't say that. That is not in the spirit of the show. Where is negative Norris when I need him?
Drake Maye's just freaking sweet. We talk about how we just did Caleb Williams, the situation piled on top of also his bad plays. Drake Maye could have easily been in the same exact boat, and yet Drake Maye put the team on his back and like lifted everyone around him to the degree that all these bad football players could be lifted. Sorry if I offend people for calling NFL players bad, but in the grand scheme of things, in comparison to other, players at those spots, he was with a bunch of nobodies. And yet Drake Maye was still electric. He still held onto the football as long as possible to give his players actual chances to get open down the field. And he is already one of the most mobile, athletic, scrambling quarterbacks in the league. I think he was either number 2 or number 3 in yards per game when it came to running the football. And Matt, that was without a single designed run last season. Didn't have one, maybe one, but not 2. And so I just can't wait for Josh McDaniels to add that into his bag. What Josh McDaniels did with Cam Newton during, that final season, basically in the league that he had as a full-time starter, and just build an offense around the strengths of what Drake Maye brings. Because I am obsessed with Drake Maye as a prospect in the league.
I am also very excited about Drake Maye. So look, I think he's a great pick at QB 16, even Incredible. If he doesn't take a leap. Okay. Like this conversation we're having today, like what happens if he doesn't take a leap? Like maybe he doesn't take a leap, but I still think he's a great pick at QB 16 because you mentioned that rushing ability. Like give me the over on the 455 rushing yards Yahoo's projecting for him. I think he will definitely go over that. I mean, again, he had 444 last year and 421 of those yards were on scrambles. Like I believe he was second in scramble yards behind only Jayden Daniels last year and even start the full damn season. So again, I think the rushing ability for Maye is still very understated, will make him a great fantasy quarterback. But how can it go wrong this year? Look no further that all the other guys we're talking about here have at least 3+ players. One of them has, we're going to get to him next, has 5 players going in the top 110 overall selections in fantasy. That's not everything, right? But Travion Henderson, 59th overall, Stephon Diggs, 86th overall. That's it. Like, how this goes wrong for Drake Maye, I think, is that some of these offensive line upgrades are, they get them from unspeakably bad to just bad, okay? And then the skill position guys, unless Diggs, who I think played really well last year before tearing his ACL, and by all accounts, like, I think is going to be ready early, like maybe just week 1. Like, he might just be ready to rock out there, but we'll see who he is. Like, the skill position room doesn't come together. The offensive line is still a problem. It can very easily go wrong for Drake Maye in terms of not taking a leap here in year 2.
Yeah, I think I'm most nervous about this offensive line going from awful to average. You know, Morgan Moses is defying age out there. He's still a really good right tackle, but that can change at any point, right? Garrett Bradbury, the Minnesota Vikings' #1 offseason objective was to fix their guard and center combinations. And it was to get rid of Garrett Bradbury. And here he is penciled and most likely in pen as the Patriots starting center. Cole Strange has dealt with a ton of injuries at left guard. And then, Will Campbell, obviously the first offensive lineman, first tackle off the board. But if you stack him up against, previous top tackles in NFL drafts, I think some people might question him actually sticking long-term at that position. For a team that is crying out for playmakers, Mac Hollins is a starting outside wide receiver for you as of this moment. We need Kyle Williams to immediately in preseason make his mark, because you and I are big Kyle Williams fans. And then, at the same time, Matt, Drake Maye was making it work with freaking Kayshon Boutte on vertical routes down the sideline last year. Just launching missile launchers. He can do that to Kyle Williams. He can do that to our guy, who can also win after the catch as well. So, and you get Josh McDaniels. Like, I understand Josh McDaniels, it didn't end that well with the Vegas Raiders. He got fired midseason. But now going back to, as you said, being just an offensive coordinator and play caller, that actually takes, to me, the infrastructure, the scheme, everything to build around this talent at the quarterback position. And let's take it just to average, and then go from average to like launching point in 2026 and 2027. Yeah,
I actually, there are a lot of ifs here as well. Even just like the offensive line, I agree with you, is I think personally the bigger concern than the playmakers for Drake Maye. But just focusing in on the skill position group, I'm actually pretty optimistic about Kyle Williams being like a ready to go. Like, he can make an impact as a rookie. I'm actually feeling pretty good about Stephon Diggs as the top receiver for this team. I actually think him and Drake Maye, I'm not going to say that he's going to do the Josh Allen thing for Drake Maye, Stephon Diggs, but like, we could maybe get a discount version of that, like a Bud Light version of that. I think that is very possible. Diggs is such a quarterback friendly wide receiver, and I think that he works really well with these quarterbacks who are like, hey, just get open and I'm going to find you. And like, look no further than Drake Maye's connection with Josh Downs is just open all the time, and he would just consistently find him back at UNC. And again, like little role players like Matt Collins, that they didn't have like those type of guys last year. They didn't have those. Even Jalen Polk, like, I think there's a chance that he could just be a usable NFL player. Like, and Demario Douglas, nobody really talks about Pop Douglas, but he's a solid enough slot receiver. I think that the skill position group, along with Travion Henderson as a receiver out of the backfield, can actually be. I'm feeling pretty good about that. But how it goes wrong, really, to me, is that that offensive line is gone from horrendous to bad, which is probably not good enough for Drake Maye to truly make the leap in his second season.
Drake is so good at, again, holding the football, just almost fading away from where he knows the pressure is going to be, and giving, again, his pass catchers that extra moment of just having a chance, and then him throwing the football up to them in contested situations. He also is a bit scattershot at times. He's not like the most accurate
he's not
quarterback
perfect.
out there.
Yeah.
No, he's not perfect. So that can be a negative on top of this. But I'm just looking at this list that we're talking through, Matt, from Jayden Daniels down to Caleb Williams, down to someone we're going to finish the show with in Michael Penix. He has like the worst lead wide receiver attached to him. Like, I would put Courtland Sutton ahead of what Stephon Diggs is at this moment, right? So that is always a concern when we always talk about second year leaps or massive leaps for these young quarterbacks. That often is attached to adding in a top flight wide receiver or alpha wide receiver to them. Drake May just doesn't have that at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because Diggs is obviously is a diminished version of himself, but it's extra tough that he's coming off of the injury, because I would say that the player that he was last year was certainly better than the player DJ Moore was last year, and certainly was better. And I think was better than the player Courtland Sutton was last year. So I do think that. But again, that's what he was last year. I don't know what he's going to be this year. And I mean, even a guy like Roma
also
Dunze,
attached to like better. Nico Collins, if we can like look at an environment and like where he was deployed to, there's a whole bunch of, and correct me if I'm wrong, slot stuff, and he did a ton of damage inside the red zone. But like now he has to be the premier pass catcher for this team. But I actually prefer him not deployed as a slot player. I think he was. Okay. Like, he was used that way by the Texans because that is what they needed him to be. He's not the, hey, perimeter, go win down the field guy that he was in Buffalo. I think that's where he, even back in 2023, took a big step back, was as a vertical separator. But he can still, it's not like, hopefully Kyle Williams can be that vertical guy for them. But I think there's a real overlap in their games. I think in a best case scenario, Diggs is that top outside flanker this year, and then Kyle Williams is that guy in 2026 and beyond for them, because I actually think their games overlap pretty well. But to me, I actually would prefer Diggs as a man coverage beater on the outside, because I think that has been where he's always best, and to me still is the strength of his game. So just looking at the team and putting a bow on it, last year they were 30th in points scored per contest at 17. And their red zone touchdown success rate was also 30th in the league, Matt, at 47%. I think how it could go wrong is it doesn't move the needle enough for, fans out there to believe that like they are going in the right direction. If that goes from 30th to 20th, to me, that's again, massive win. 18th, that's a big win, but it's not top 10. It's not 8. No. It's not to the degree that we talk about Washington or even Denver last year, maybe Atlanta or Chicago get to. There's a chance that they improve a lot and still are the 6th best offense that we were talking about today.
Yeah, I think that is very, very possible, especially when we get to these next two offenses that we're going to talk about, because they're pretty well set up here, starting with J.J. McCarthy, 118th overall selection, QB 18 in fantasy right now. I can't ask you, Josh, what you thought of his rookie season because you didn't have one. So what do we think about him entering what was a situation last year that, frankly, I think they upgraded on from an offensive line standpoint? And regardless, produced one of the most productive quarterbacks in the NFL last season. I'm not saying that Sam Darnold was one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL last season, but he was extremely productive in this offense last season.
Yeah, and KOC leaned into exactly what Sam Darnold was good at, which is these rockets down the field, attacking vertically. They were a big play machine on both sides of the ball. You look at how Brian Flores calls his defense, it's sacks, it's takeaways. And then on offense, it's, we are going to eat up chunks of yards with downfield shots to Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson, and there's really nothing you can do about it. We're going to take some sacks, we're going to throw some interceptions, some turnover-worthy plays, but that's it. I think that's quite different than what J.J. McCarthy is good at. What I loved about J.J. McCarthy coming out of Michigan is if you looked at his 3rd and 5 plus reel, so like gotta have it situations, he was arguably like the best quarterback in this class at that, like working from under center, again, got to have 6, 7 plus yards, always throwing beyond the sticks, going through 1st, 2nd, 3rd read, working in confined pockets. I know at Michigan, they dominated everyone else. But again, that was kind of the area of the field that made me sold on J.J. McCarthy was the 3rd and 5 plus stuff. I just wonder, and this is an unanswerable question, Matt, someone who played a lot at Michigan, won the national championship, then was brought in like a real quarterback competition during his preseason. Let's not forget that. Like JJ looked really good during that first preseason game, and it was probably going to be tight who was going to be the starter. And at some point, no matter what, unless they went on the run they did last year, he was going to get starts, then gets injured after the first time you touch an NFL field. What does that do to you mentally? What does that do to you physically? These are all answers we do not have. And while he looked good in the only exposure that we did see, he could be a slightly different player because of that once he enters the NFL in 2025.
Yeah, he's just such a tough player to talk about, to the point that I feel like I really haven't talked about him all that much this offseason, and just haven't really talked much about the Vikings from a fantasy standpoint because which is bad because, by the way, like, hey, if this goes wrong with JJ McCarthy, like, again, he's separate from this conversation in that he can't take a leap because he's never done anything. So if he's just not good this year, like I said, he's the guy I was talking about. There are 5 players going in the top 110 picks for the Minnesota Vikings. Justin Jefferson, 3rd overall. Jordan Addison, 71st overall. Aaron Jones, 78th overall. TJ Hawkinson, 87th overall. Jordan Mason, the freaking backup running back, 102nd overall. Maybe backup running back, the second man of the committee, the goal line guy, whatever they're kind of phrasing it as. If this goes wrong with McCarthy, somebody's getting banged here. From a fantasy standpoint, maybe multiple people.
I agree. I could also see him playing well and not even coming close to the 35 passing touchdowns that Sam Darnold put out there last year because they did bring in Jordan Mason for short yardage and red zone stuff. At the very least, it could be a lot more than that. You improve your guard combination. And so your rushing success is also going to be improved because, again, the efficiency, everything to me is tied to that interior when we talk about those stats. And yeah, I mean, we have seen Kevin O'Connell when he had to bring in like Nick Mullins as a starting quarterback, throw the football like 38 or 42 times on any given, week. I don't think he's going to ask JJ McCarthy to do that. I think they're going to be a bit more balanced. I think at times we don't say, I don't know enough. We just don't know how this is. I'll throw one quick wrinkle at you. Okay.
Okay.
Josh McCown and I, close friends, used to do a show with him over at Underdog. He's obviously JJ's quarterback coach, did a great job with Sam last year. Kevin O'Connell, one of the best play callers in the league. I don't know if it's getting enough buzz of losing Grant Udinski from this team. Grant Udinski did a fantastic job of getting these young quarterbacks, or let's say journeyman quarterbacks in a way with Sam, prepared for their upcoming opponents early in the week. And so they could be ready for the game plans later in the week. And Grant is now off to, work with Liam Cohen in Jacksonville. So if we're looking behind the scenes, if there are any steps that are taken back, a young gun in Grant Udinski could be reason for that too.
This is such a great point because I think that the saying is like it takes a village, right, to raise a child. And but ultimately when we do this with quarterbacks, like no, it's just one whisper, it's one guy. It's just, and like obviously if we're using the family analogy, Kevin O'Connell is like the head of the family. He's the top of the tree.
But he has so much more to do because he's the head coach. He doesn't spend as much time coach in this actual quarterback room as Josh and Grant did last year.
Exactly. So like the success of the quarterback has many fathers. It's not just one guy. And I mean, obviously, again, I think O'Connell takes a real interest and like affinity for rehabbing these quarterbacks or being like a great quarterback coach or whatever. But it might actually be like in time that there's the brain drain from Minnesota. So that is a really good point to bring up in terms of how this can go wrong. I kind of want to frame it this way, Josh, in that you made the point about the passing touchdowns. This team was 5th in touchdown rate last year behind the Ravens, the Bucks, the Lions, the Bengals, 5th Minnesota Vikings. But they were, 15th in EPA per play. They were 15th in success rate. I actually think that they could be a more successful and efficient offense because at times last year it felt like they were too volatile, honestly. Like they leaned into too much of like the deep shots and the Sam Darnold of it all. It might be a lot for McCarthy it might be a lot to ask of McCarthy as a, sort of rookie quarterback to come in and take this from the 15th offense in success rate to the 10th. But like if the run game is better, which they clearly want the run game to be better based on the offensive line additions, bringing in a veteran back like Jordan Mason, the run game could be better. The pass game could just be smoother overall. They're like 10th in passing success rate, but they might be, 16th in touchdown rate or something like that. And then is Justin Jefferson or Jordan Addison or TJ Hawkinson, like, do those guys sort of suffer there from a fantasy standpoint, even if McCarthy isn't bad as a starter?
Yep. I think those are all very fair and valid points. Again, the shot plays hit so hot for them numerous occasions last year, both offensively and defensively. If it doesn't, you're going to have more, drives of 9, 10, 11, 12 plays. And just simply put, things can go wrong more frequently on things like that.
Absolutely fair. Okay, last guy we are going to talk about here today is Michael Penix, 132nd overall, QB 21. Brief little glimpse of Michael Penix towards the end of his rookie season, Josh, but what did you think of it when you went back and watched it?
He's, I don't know if electric is the right word or high variance. I want to combine all these words and phrases. He's a sight to see. Let's put it that way. He is he throws the rock, man. Like he's outside the numbers, down the field. We're going to get there, the football, as quickly as possible and make some big time throws. Now, there's also plenty of times where I couldn't tell if he threw it to the guy that he intended to, and the ball was still completed. Short passes were just, and especially intermediate areas, were just like sailed over top of wide receivers. We got the tiniest sample ever for a guy that was actually on like a pretty good football team that had a chance in week 18 to like make the playoffs. And those games were against the Giants defense, the Commanders defense, and the Panthers defense that did not have JC Horn on it. So I like this Atlanta team. Love Bijan. Really like Drake London and how they weaponized him as the slot player. When he lined up in the slot last year, he was getting the football more often than not, right? Even Darnell Mooney stepping up and being like a really dependable player. Plus this offensive line, despite having a new center, there's a lot to work with here. And I think Zach Robinson did a really good job. But I do believe that Michael Penix is going to be like a high variance quarterback in the league. Not to the degree that Jameis Winston is, but he's maybe on that spectrum, the Jameis Winston spectrum a little bit here.
Like Matthew Stafford is maybe the godfather, like the peak archetype of that spectrum. And then, there's Jameis somewhere over here. And I think the Falcons are hoping that Penix is not just in the middle, but maybe leans a little bit more towards the Stafford side than the Jameis side. I'm really not sure where I come down on that. I overall feel pretty good about Penix, and I really want to watch him. And unlike some of the other guys that we've talked about here, like I do think this situation, I'm not going to call it bulletproof, but I think because I kind of wish they added like one offensive lineman or added, one other skill position. Like I don't really need to see Ray McLeod here as a guy that we're just penciling in to see a bunch of snaps again. Like nice little role player, but next question. Anyways, Josh, I'm the host here. Don't force me into answering questions I don't wish to answer. Anyways, Drake London usage was awesome last year. I've talked a lot about that. It was fantastic. Darnell Mooney was good. The offensive line's good. And I actually think the run game with Bijan could be even better this year because they were so outside zone heavy last year. If they start mixing, get Kyle Pitts off the screen, Colin, for God's sakes. Like, we're not talking about Kyle Pitts. I'm talking about Bijan Robinson here. Thank you very much. Anyways, Bijan, he's still on the screen. Bijan Robinson could be even better this year if they mix in like more gap concepts that I think Bijan could be. Thank you very much. The correct player on the graphic here. Kyle Pitts, give me a break. This run game could be even better. So I think that the situation is really well set up for Michael Penix. I'm probably like, we did this on Football 301, like a 1 out of 10. Where do you fall on the optimistic scale? I was like a 5.5 or a 6, which Falcons fans were pissed about. They did not think that was good enough. But like, honestly, if Michael Penix is a 6 out of 10 player in this offense, I think that is good enough for Bijan to go 2nd overall and Drake London to go 16th overall. Like definitely the 2 highest teammates we've talked about, in addition to Darnell Mooney also being a top 100 selection.
He's also one of those passers, Matt, that could have like a pretty rough 3 quarters. They're still in the game by like, down 6 points. And then the final 2 drives, he just is total lights out and dynamite and then wins them the game. And then you only think about those final 2 drives. Or it can be one of these guys that was lights out for 3 quarters. Somehow it's still a tight game because their defense wasn't able to stop the opponent and then let you down with the final 2 drives as well. Yeah. So again, that's kind of what I mean here by high variance. He's going to be must watch. And like on some level, Matt, me and you watching so much NFL football on a weekly basis, I want to be able to turn on a game on Monday morning and see someone doing and making throws that other quarterbacks aren't across the league. And Michael Penix is that way. I do want to call attention to, look, he tested like an athlete coming out at the NFL Combine. At Indiana, he was quite mobile. I don't see him as one of these creative or mobile quarterbacks. And on some level, you almost have to have that now. Like he kind of is a trebuchet at this point, to the degree that like Carson Wentz was towards the final years of his starting experience, where he would kind of get planted and then just unleash these downfield shots, versus you need to have some mobility in tight constraining pockets to work around, reset, and throw. Or if that is completely gone, buy some time moving outside into space and then creating outside of there. I think of all the quarterbacks that we listed today, I would put his probably creative mobility down at the bottom when it comes to the actual quarterback position as a passer and a runner. Both.
Yeah, I think that's actually pretty fair. And like, honestly, that's maybe less about Penix and more just like all these guys have pretty good like functional athleticism. And yeah, Penix just really hasn't been that guy. Maybe he is now that he's healthier after some of these knee injuries in college. I don't know. I mean, I'll leave the light open for that, but I certainly think he's not quite like an Aaron Rodgers at this point in his career where he's so touchdown to check down, but he's not like that. I mean, I do think that Penix can activate the middle of the field, maybe more than a guy like, friggin' Aaron Rodgers at this point in his career, or Russell Wilson. I don't think he's necessarily like that, but he is definitely more likely. And I think this is a credit to him. He's more likely to read plays out, and instead of like trying to escape pressure, like, oh, here's my check down, I'll get it to that guy, which by the way, could be pretty good for a guy like Bijan Robinson catching a bunch of passes this year.
It was interesting to watch Ryan Grubb call the Seahawks offense last year, where we talked about Bobby Slowick at the front and a bunch of these other, even Clint Kubiak who replaced him. It's a bunch of, compact, condensed formations. Ryan Grubb in college was like, we're going to spread it out, use all the field, and throw like jump balls to all three of these wide receivers, from Rome to Polk to Jalen McMillan, right? I kind of wonder what Michael Penix is most comfortable with. Is it spreading all of these guys out, or is it now, which is somewhat of a cheat code in the NFL, are these condensed formations and everything? Again, we have a tiny little sample of it. And at the same time, Matt, like, this team kind of has to keep Kirk Cousins for multiple reasons. One, they paid his bonus at the end of last year. Two, then they trade away their first round pick in 2026. And so if something for a string of games does happen to Michael Penix, to me now, at the very least, you have what this version of Kirk Cousins can come in and step in and try to win some games, so you don't bottom out and like give up a top 5 selection in the 2026 draft.
Just your point about the formation width of it all, last year, Seattle was 5th in terms of the widest formation width, and the Falcons were the 7th like most condensed overall, like average wise on offense. So,
and it makes sense. Obviously, Zach Robinson coming from Sean McVay, of course, and all that tree.
Yes.
Oh
yeah. I mean, the just that top 7, it's Rams, Niners, Lions, Texans, Vikings, Packers, Falcons. Like, it's all, other than Ben Johnson there, which, by the way, that'll be interesting for the Bears, of course. Other than Ben Johnson, it's all the guys you would expect from that tree. So I really think that this one's the most simple equation here, Josh. Like, how can it go wrong? I just think like Michael Penix, he would have to be bad for it to go wrong, because I think the situation is actually pretty good. But again, I know this is contrarian corner. This is not in the spirit of the exercise. I actually think I feel pretty good about him not being bad this year overall.
Yeah. Trust me, viewers, I don't think every player is going to have a good year. Unfortunately, I think that basically all 6 of these quarterbacks are in like good situations to improve on, or possibly close to repeat their solid seasons from last year. So this was a tough exercise, I think, Matt.
It was, and that is why I brought you in to do it. We're going to take one last break, and then I'm gonna let you be optimistic on the other side, Josh. We're going to quickly rank these guys for Dynasty, and then we're going to get out of here right after this. All right, Josh, because I made you be negative this whole show, even when you don't believe that all these guys are going to fail, we're going to end this thing on a positive note. We're going to rank these guys from a Dynasty perspective, these 6 quarterbacks. Before we do that, I just want to ask you from a Dynasty startup perspective, is there any quarterback, and obviously we're assuming super flex here or whatever, is there any quarterback you'd rather have than Jayden Daniels if you're startup Dynasty drafting today?
I wouldn't argue with anyone that still wants to take Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. Both are still under 30 or under 29 years of age. There's longevity in it. Both have sustained top 5 scoring seasons again and again and again and again. but Jayden Daniels should easily be the, at worst, third quarterback off the board, whether you're a regular Dynasty League or a Superflex Dynasty League.
To me, I think I would still take Jayden Daniels or Josh Allen ahead of, Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen ahead of Jayden Daniels there, just because I think if you're looking more than 3 years ahead, if you're viewing this more than 3-year windows in Dynasty, to me, I think that's too much. Like, I get it. Like, you want to default to the younger player, but dude, who the F knows what's going to be going on 3 years from now for any of these guys? But I think I'll just take the proven, like, elite year after year product in situations that, by the way, like, I don't think the Bills are turning over the coaching staff. I don't think the Ravens are turning things over there. And I have faith in how those teams are built, maybe a little bit more than Washington after just one good year. So that's my view on it. But let's rank these 6 guys here, Josh. Go first to 6th. How would you order these guys from a Dynasty Superflex perspective?
First is Jayden Daniels in a tier of his own. Okay. Then I think there's a pocket of 3 guys after that. I'm going to go out on a limb and say Drake Maye is going to be the second quarterback for me at the start of tier 2. And maybe I'm focusing in a bit too much on the rushing that he brought last year as a scrambler, but we always talk about it at the quarterback position. Rushing brings you the floor, then it's like the week-to-week consistency. Then the passing aspect is what brings you the ceiling on top of that. It's often viewed as the inverse, but that's at least how I'm interpreting it with the quarterback position. Then for me next, it is going to be Caleb Williams. And I'm going to go Bo Nix in this tier. So that's this second group. And then after that, I'm actually going to go JJ McCarthy and then Michael Penix to close this thing out. So top to bottom, Jayden Daniels, Drake Maye, Caleb Williams, Bo Nix, JJ McCarthy, Michael Penix. What about you?
This is pretty boring because our list is very similar. I also will go Jayden Daniels number 1, tier of his own. He's obviously closer to Lamar and Josh Allen than he is to any of these other guys if we're just ranking the position league wide. I do think Drake Maye should be the guy that's second though, because we are looking for that rushing ceiling and floor combination. I think he presents that more than any of the others, even though Bo Nix was a nice, useful rusher last year. We didn't really talk about this too much. I wonder if this run game being better in Denver this year might necessitate less rushing for Bo Nix going 100%. Forward. But still, he does bring a decent bit of that. I'll go Caleb Williams after Drake Maye, though, because I am generally optimistic about what Ben Johnson's going to be for this team. By the way, like, Ben Johnson hits, like, if he's the next Sean McVay, if he's the next Kyle Shanahan, like, those guys are going to be tethered together forever. Like, he's not going anywhere. Yes. You know, like I will take that upside there, because I also think Williams is underrated, or at least was not maximized as a scrambler and as a design runner as much as he could be last year. Next, I do think you got to go Bo Nix. And then the only way I'm going to go different from you here is I'll actually put Penix ahead of McCarthy. Maybe that's a mistake, but I think that if you're not going to be a rushing quarterback in fantasy, you have to be like a guy that could throw 40 touchdowns in a season. And I do think if Michael Penix hits, bro, like he's going to be one of, yeah, right. Wow, shit. Details. I think you have to be a guy that's going to throw like 40 touchdowns in a season, like a Jared Goff or a Baker Mayfield. And I think that Michael Penix could be that type of guy.
Yeah. The only reason I'm putting McCarthy ahead, again, we've seen one guy for 3 games, one guy for no games, is the Kevin O'Connell factor here. You know, like as what you said with Caleb and Ben Johnson, these guys could be tied together for the next 7, 8, 9, 10 years. And if that's the case, I'm just such an admirer of what KOC does and how he's made fantasy stars out of fantasy scrubs, you know, and I think he can make something happen this year at the very least with JJ McCarthy. But that's why, you know, we watch the games.
And that is going to do it for today's show. But before we get out of here, I do have to share some big news with the people. If you've made it this long, you're definitely going to want to hear this. We have finally launched a new Yahoo Fantasy YouTube page. We're breaking away from the Yahoo Sports main YouTube, so we're launching a fantasy-specific one to give you a one-stop shop for all your fantasy needs. And even bigger news, I got to inhale because this is going to be a long one. The pod's going to be live every Sunday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific on the Yahoo Fantasy YouTube starting August 3rd. I mean, my God, I'm going to be just here live all these freaking days with you people. What more could you possibly ask for? Full transparency, by the way, if you're watching this now, the best content from our summer shows are going to be on that fantasy YouTube page. And then we're going to make the full switch to putting our shows there on August 3rd. So a little bit of a transition period. That's how you got to do things on YouTube, as a true YouTube bro like Josh Norris here knows. Be sure to subscribe to the page now. Get ready for everything with your fantasy drafts this draft season and beyond. Josh, I'm so happy I could break that news here on the show with, again, YouTube royalty like yourself.
And I'm glad this show wasn't live, because you would take me 5 minutes to find a stat that producer Colin is going to be able to get rid of. So much appreciated.
Well, when we're live, I mean, we're just going to have to just deal with that stuff. And that is that's why they pay producer Colin the big bucks. Okay. So that he can figure that stuff out on the fly. Josh, I appreciate the hell out of you for joining us for this show. A tough one, because this is a fun group of players. We had to be sort of kind of a little bit negative about it. Where can the people check out all of your great work right now?
Just check out Underdog Fantasy Football on YouTube. We obviously have a podcast feed as well. The big aid you could help us with is go follow us on Instagram. It's UD Football Show. We just launched socials on all those platforms. And yeah, Matt, can't wait for August and September, the big months for us. And I'll continue to watch and support your content, because you are great at this, my man.
Same to you, buddy. Definitely. If you like this show, you're definitely going to like Josh and Hayden's show. They talk about the game the right way. And I think you could tell that they do the work by especially actually watching the players if you check out their content. So definitely full-throated endorsement on that one. That is going to do it for us today. Justin Boone is going to be back on the show on Thursday to ask for our final, I think this is the final Contrarian Corner. I should know the schedule of my own podcast, but I don't. I'm pretty sure this is the final Contrarian Corner. What if the rookie running back class is overhyped? Until then, we are out.